The Honourable Tim Grosser.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to just take a general look at the trade debate in New Zealand to see where we stand. And if we look at this from the perspective of what the Prime Minister's just said in relationship to productivity, it is absolutely clear that the only way through this is we're going to have to increase our trade performance.
That's right.
Because the trade performance is linked intimately to the productivity performance. There's a complicated issue out here about which comes first, higher productivity, then exporting, or exporting and then higher productivity. But what we know from our long experience of excellence in agriculture is that once you get locked into a situation where not the New Zealand domestic market, but the world market is the market of great concern, you're locked into a virtuous circle of higher productivity increases, constant innovation, world-class marketing, and that means, frankly, a better future for New Zealand, better paid jobs, and that's what we've got to move more and more space into this in the years ahead. Now, the Prime Minister's put this very simply in explaining the situation to New Zealanders, that we're not going to get richer by selling to ourselves. And we've taken a whole suite of policy measures, many of them going well beyond what people can traditionally conceive of as the trade debate, to try and move New Zealand over a period of the next 5 to 10 years into a better space. And there are issues around regulatory reform, there are issues around improving our infrastructure, they even involve issues around cleaning up the tail end of our education system, because in a knowledge economy that we're all living in nowadays, we can't tolerate a situation where some 20% of New Zealanders are having 10 years of compulsory education and coming out functionally illiterate and enumerate. So there's a whole suite of policies, but given my responsibilities, let me focus on the trade negotiations side. We have a situation, Mr. Speaker, I think if we look at it at the biggest level of aggregation, that's truly fascinating. Basically, as others have put it, what's happening historically is that the world's wealth is moving back fundamentally to where the most people in the world live. So we're moving into a situation where I think New Zealand is getting a real return from 3 decades of intensive attempts to try and integrate ourselves more into the Asian region, this is fundamentally an Asian story. So we have these 2 giant superpowers emerging, China obviously well ahead of the other, India, and it's very important that we're able to position ourselves with these 2 great countries in the most appropriate way. And I want to acknowledge the contribution the previous government made to this debate. The basic reality is that some 70% of our exports are now in the Asia-Pacific region, Mr. Speaker, and you yourself made a contribution to that earlier in your own career. And I always see now the Australian market as part of that same triangle. Australia is 23% of our exports. It's nearly double, or about double, our second largest export market to China. And I think the reason why Australia escaped the recession is fundamentally because they too have been able to link, perhaps even in a more effective way than us, into the Asian growth story. So the fact is that we're able to exploit these opportunities now. We do have an excellent framework for that, and I think the chances are that we'll get even more progress made in the future than in the past. So we have a situation where we have an excellent trade relationship now with Southeast Asia, and our exports to the ASEAN region are increasing at around about compound average rate of about 11% per annum. The explosive growth in China, I think, is really exciting and a huge fillip for us. And when I think about some of the debates we might have had around domestic policy settings 15, 20 years ago, for example, take the water debate in this country, because a lot of people are quite rightly focusing on the need for us to use more efficiently the enormous amount of water that lands on New Zealand without actually contributing anything, because it just runs straight off the land. And if you'd asked anyone involved in New Zealand trade a decade ago, would it make sense economically to invest a lot in better water infrastructure? I think the answer would have been, well, probably not, because we have enough trouble finding markets for our existing agriculture exports. But I think the situation we face now is good, it's getting better, and will involve many new opportunities and better paid jobs for all New Zealanders.